Hello, everyone. How are you? And I am Violet Lee. And in the studio with me is Dr. John Painter. He dressed nicely while I am only wearing a t-shirt, a hand-me-down t-shirt. And if you have followed this series, The Life and Time of Dr. John Painter, you have probably learned already. John had such powerful, exciting life. And if you have not watched those, you should go back and to the previous episode and to find out, he almost shot and stabbed by the gangster in Mexico. And he was a bodyguard for mob. And he was an excellent musician. And he freed himself from a straitjacket and was hanging upside down from a construction crane.
Yes. Long time ago.
Long time ago. If that's not enough, okay, and you will be totally amazed by today's interview. Okay. And just simply, hear the title, you say, what is that? It's called Buried Alive. Yes, Buried Alive. And of course, you will say, well, I watched the previous episode. I know John is such a great magician. That's probably just a gimmick, right? So without further ado, and let's welcome John and then talk about his interesting and fascinating life. And so as I mentioned, you were buried alive before. And then can you talk about this? Why you wanted to be buried alive? It was life too boring. So you decided to be buried alive and just to experience and how they feel. Isn't that right?
Yeah, well, I did the buried alive thing twice, but it wasn't a trick. I was a magician, yes. And a professional magician, and I appeared in a lot of things you can see in our earlier interview that we did. But this was actually a demonstration of the Lee family Qigong that was derived from my Chinese and Tibetan training that I received throughout my life. I learned the ability to slow my heart rate and respiration, and also learned the art of Gtumo, or it's spelled Gtumo actually, which is the ability to withstand extreme heat and cold in wearing only a thin cotton garment. I learned those skills originally from my first teacher, Master Lee, when I was a young boy. Some years later, I studied real Tibetan Gtumo, which is a spiritual practice that is also a method of increasing the warmth of the body to do other things. Now, you mentioned the buried alive thing, and all of this ties together, Violet. You may not know this, but a lot of magicians have done this buried alive stunt, and actually 3 of them have died trying to do that. Theirs were mostly tricks. The fakirs in India back in the 1930s used to claim that they were being buried alive. They would go into a trance and that sort of thing, and then they would bury them underground. Mine was a real thing, no tricks. Most of the fakirs were shown to be actually doing it in a fake way. They would dig a big hole in the ground, and then they would be put in there in a coffin, or else just even covered up by dirt. But mostly what they were doing when the British government came in and looked was they had a tunnel that went somewhere along, and they could go out and come up and then get back in there later when they were supposed to be dug up. There were a few who actually could do these things. There's an article about some of the fakirs that they actually tested, and they were actually able to slow their heart rate, their respiration, and so on to almost imperceptible limits. And I was fascinated by this and realized that there must be something to it. I did this buried alive thing twice. The first one was in 1972 at a club in Dallas. Now, I'll put up some photos here. It was to promote my escape and Harry Houdini-like shows that I were doing at the time, but it still wasn't a trick. I only did that for about 3 hours. The second one was in 1977. And that came about because I was performing magic at various places around Dallas, and a lot of very wealthy people would invite me to their homes when they had a big party, and I would do my magic and so on. And so I ran into a doctor at this party, and another fellow who was a very wealthy guy who owned 3 or 4 auto dealerships. And they came up to me after my little demonstration and show, and they said, we saw that thing you did at the Blue Chip Club some time ago, and we think that was a fake. And I said, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but it wasn't. It was pretty darn scary. I said, I've trained myself to be able to slow my heart rate and respiration like those fakirs that in India. And I also can hold my breath because of my underwater escape things that I've done for about 8 minutes without having to take a breath. But of course, that's not the same as 3 hours or longer. And the doctor basically said, you know, I just can't accept that. It's not real. And I said, well, okay, let's try this. I said, is that your wife over there? He said, yeah. I said, does she work with you? She said, yes, she's a nurse. I said, okay. So will you hold my pulse here? And will you ask her to hold my pulse over here? She said, yeah, so what? I said, okay, well, wait a second. Okay, tell me what pulse you get over here on the left, doctor. He said, it's 65 or so. And his wife says, no, it's 42. I said, so this pulse is 42, that pulse is 65. What is going on here? Maybe I can do what I say I can do.
Somebody lost count.
Yeah. I said, okay. So he says, well, I still don't believe that stuff. I said, you're doing some kind of a trick. I said, well, you know, you want me to get naked and take off my clothes and show you that I don't have anything anywhere? And he said, no. And the guy was listening that was the big businessman. So he said, well, why don't you let them test you with this, you know, ability to slow your heart rate and your respiration and all that? I said, well, yeah, we could do that if you want to do it. And the guy said, well, let's do it in a controlled setting somewhere in the hospital. And I said, well, okay, but I think it would be better that people would believe it if we did it out where the public can see it. And I looked at the businessman and I said, you know, if you footed the bill for it, we could do this at your dealership on a concrete slab. And that way there could be no trick to it at all. And then you could just see if this really works.
So there cannot be a tunnel if it's on their concrete, surface.
Yeah, we're gonna build a box on the slab there. Back in the 70s, you got to realize that very few people knew very much about mind-body medicine like we have today. And the doctors were very skeptical. One of the only people that had written anything about this was Dr. Herbert Benson in his first book. And then later, Herbert Benson went off and wrote a second book. And in that second book, he had gone off and studied with the Tibetans and found out that they really could do this kind of stuff. So this guy wanted to put up the money to do a big thing. And I said, well, this would be good publicity for your auto show, you know, and maybe I can make a little for my reputation as well. So that's what we did. Now, this whole thing was basically, I would say what you would call it. You asked me about Qigong in another interview. So I could explain it from the standpoint of Qigong if you want me to do it that way.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that, when you mentioned, you say that you're using your teacher's qigong and method, and also the Tibetan way, and then you also mentioned about, say, in a very cold environment, and
Oh yeah.
I also record, and previously, I don't remember it was in one of the interviews or it was just we were chatting, and you were telling me you and your uh, teacher just have a underpants, right? And then went into a freezer and did
Oh
not
yeah, yeah,
get,
yeah, yes, yes.
did
I'll
not
tell you
get
about that.
frozen to death,
Yeah.
right? So all these things, it's all sounds so mystical and mysterious to
See,
me.
they do sound that way
Yeah.
if you don't understand the process. It's just like, when you're a magician and you do a magic trick and you take something and you make it disappear, you have a ring, or something like that, and you take it and you put it in your hand and it vanishes.
Ooh,
Okay. Well, it's actually still back on my hand, but that's a trick. And when you know how the trick works, it's not so magical anymore.
how did you do that? Oh my God.
Because I was a magician. But
I
the
know you
fact
for so
is,
long. I never seen you did that. Oh my God. So
the
should I
fact is,
believe every word you say from this point? Oh my.
the fact is that qigong
Uh-huh.
is also. There was a guy that wrote
I
a book
also
some
a
time ago.
magic.
No, it's not magic. That's the thing. The guy wrote a book and he had a quote in there that I really liked. He said, "Magic is just the science of the future that we haven't really understood yet,"
Okay.
which I kind of like.
I
Um,
like that a lot.
yeah. So for me, I've been working with what you call qigong since probably around 1957 when I started with my teacher. I was seeing his stuff. At first, I bought into his explanations about qigong, but then when I went to college, I was studying psychology, and I got seriously into hypnosis. And I came to believe that that's really how the mind controls the body. And it's done really by visualization exercises. The mind can command the body to do amazing things if you can tap in to the unconscious mind. And that is what I believe Qigong does. It taps into the control system of the body, and by using suggestion or visualization, you can do all of these things like internal heat, the Gtumo business. You can slow your heart rate. You can increase it. That's how I was doing it with the doctor that I was amazing at the party. So that's really what it is to me. Um, and the more I worked with it, the more I came to understand. Yes, we have a lot more control of ourselves and our physical processes than we actually realize that we do. Um, with the right training, anybody can do this. It's not mystical, it's not magical. It's something the Creator gave us in the beginning, and we just haven't all learned to use it all that well yet. I've been able to use it to overcome injuries. I've been able to use it to overcome cuts and bruises, even a gunshot wound. I've been able to overcome the heart attack that I had some years ago, and I got better faster than they said anybody else they'd ever worked on had gotten better. So I've used that method for a long, long time. Um, so later, when I was playing with the Tibetan idea, that's where I got involved with the teacher, the Lama, Trungpa Rinpoche, and um, that was the Tibetan Gtumo stuff. Um, Gtumo is actually a spiritual practice that has a lot of different uses. A lot of people just see it as some kind of a way to keep from getting cold. You know, it's not just that. It's actually a spiritual method, Violet, where you are able to actually increase your body heat to such a degree. You're giving yourself a fever, really, that, what fever is supposed to do. Fever is supposed to burn out an infection or what the Chinese doctors would call pernicious influences. When you get something like that, it heats your body up and it destroys the virus or the problem. So Gtumo was used for that as well. And that's one of the things Herbert Benson discovered, was that they weren't just doing this to stay warm, but they were also doing it to heal themselves. And then there's another level of the Tibetan Gtumo, which goes into a much deeper spiritual thing. It's part of the 6 methods of Naropa, where you're learning about personal well-being, but you're also going to try to find out the truth of reality. So Gtumo has a lot of those kind of things.
And so do you want to talk a little bit of the early experience when you and your teacher went to a freezer? I'm still very curious about that. Can you talk
about? Oh, you mean
about
my Chinese teacher?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was standing, I was a young kid, and I was standing on the front porch in the winter, and he came over from his house, and I said, "Are we going to practice today? It's really, really cold." And he said, "Oh, here." And he reached out his hand. He said, "Hold my hand a minute." And I'm like, "What?" So I took hold of his hand, and his hand got warmer and warmer and warmer. And then the warmth started spreading from his hand into my arm and into my body. And I was standing there feeling warm. And I went like, "What is this?" He says, "Oh, it's Dao Yin." I said, what does that mean? He said, "Oh, I tell you before, but I'll tell you again. It means leading and guiding. I am leading my energy into you. I am guiding it into you." Later, I came to realize that it was a matter of suggestion. His arm, yes, he could heat his hand up. I know another guy in North Carolina who is an amazing massage therapist named Peter Kay. And Peter can do the same thing Master Lee used to be able to do. He would put his arm or hand on you like this, and you would swear to everybody or anything, you would swear on a stack of Bibles that this guy was a living heating pad, his just heat up. So when I realized that, I said, okay, what he did was he made me feel his warmth, and I began to believe he was giving it to me, and that let me warm myself up. And that was the beginning. So later he started telling us, Bobby and Steve and I, about this idea of increasing your body heat. And they used to do it as soldiers for survival in the brutal winters. So he started telling us about how to imagine ourselves like a big pot-bellied iron stove, and we could feel heat in our belly, and it would dantian, and it would the lower dantian, and it would move out and fill our bodies up and warm us up. And we practiced at first; it didn't do much, but as we kept at it, it started to work pretty well. So then he says, "Okay, now we go test." I said, "What do you mean we go test?" He said, "Well, we go down to your daddy's store." My dad was a lawyer, but he owned a large building, which was a 7-Eleven at the time, that had a big freezer in it. And so I said, I said, "We go down and go in the cold place." I said, "Okay." So we go down there and we're sitting in there, and he says, "Okay, you could take off pants, take off shirt, just have underwear." Okay. I said, "You've lost your mind." What? You don't question teacher, but I thought in my head, "You've lost your mind." So we're sitting on these Coke boxes, Coca-Cola wooden boxes. And he says, "Okay, now you warm up." So we worked at it, and we kind of did okay. And then we left. A couple of days later, he said, "We go again." So we go down again. This time he says, "You warm up." So we're warming up. I mean, this is a freezer where they had frozen meat in the thing. So now he has a bucket on the ground that he's got a bunch of water in with ice in it, and he starts dipping these big, huge bandanas Western type bandanas, like a big handkerchief. They're about 15 by 15 that you tie around your neck. He's dipping those in the water and putting them on our shoulders and putting them on our chest. Yeah. And he's going, okay, now you heat up, you dry. What? So we had to sit there until they started literally steaming. And it freaked me out too, because he actually started steaming when we did it like he told us to do. And he said if we could dry 2 or 3 of them within a certain amount of time, that we'd pass the test. We didn't pass it the first time, but we went back another time and we did. Because I said, this is really wild. Later, I found out when I talked about Trungpa Rinpoche, that he told me that, yeah, that's the way the Tibetans do it too. They take you out in the freezing cold, and then they put big sheets on you. They wrap you in a big sheet that's frozen, and you have to dry that. When you dry that, you become known as a respa, which means one who travels in a cotton garment, a thin cotton garment. After I learned more about the Gtumo, I started really enjoying going to visit my inheritor of my system, Yancey Orchard, Dr. Orchard, up in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, in the freezing cold weather. So it would be minus 12 Fahrenheit or later. And so he has a really good friend, he's a good friend of mine too, named Fred Flowers, who was originally a florist, but he's into Tibetan stuff. And Fred also is extremely good at Gtumo. So Fred and I would walk around outside in the snow up to our ankles, and everybody's going, you're in a t-shirt and jeans. Aren't you freezing to death? No, we're warm. We're okay. We were being smarty, kind of smarty. But Fred's better at it than I am.
You can die of pneumonia.
Yeah, but we didn't. But Fred's better than I am because he doesn't even wear shoes.
Oh, my God.
He wears no shoes. He's walking around in ice. I mean, that thick. And I'm like, wow. I thought I was pretty good at this.
Well, you should ask him to lick the pole, see if his tongue will get stuck.
Yeah, that's great. Put your tongue on this pole over here, Fred. See what happens. That's funny.
Yeah.
I miss you. I want to tell you one little secret here. I misused this skill when I was in college. Yeah, I misused it. I had a roommate, Richard Gallacy, and so we lived in the dormitory at Texas Tech University, and it was a big kind of U-shaped dormitory with a common area in the middle and big stone benches out there. And in Lubbock, Texas, which is where Texas Tech University is, the weather would get below freezing. We had snow, we had ice and so on. So every time we had snow, I would go out in my bathing suit and sit on the bench, the concrete bench, and sit there. And Rick would go gather these cowboys that lived in the dorm and say, come look at this idiot. Come look outside at this idiot. And they go, what's he doing out there? What is he doing? That guy's crazy. He's going to die. And Rick would say, I'll bet you $50 he can stay there for over an hour. So I would sit there for over an hour with the snow literally melting around me and so on, and then get up, dust myself off, and go inside. And we take the $50 and drive out. There was a dry county in those days. We would drive all the way out to where the liquor stores were and buy ourselves some beer.
That's how you made your money.
Yeah, I misused my skill, and I apologize to all my teachers for that. But yeah, that's what we did.
Yeah, that was funny. Well, actually, I did not believe Qigong for a very long time, even though while I was practicing Tai Chi. My first Tai Chi teacher, actually, she really doesn't know anything about real Tai Chi, and not to mention Qigong. She always say Tai Chi is Tai Chi, Qigong is Qigong. They're different. Don't even talk about the Qigong.
No.
So I always have the notion is Qigong is something made up. It's not real. until 1 year I was interviewing Master Zhang Xuexing. He used to live in San Francisco, and he went to St. Louis to do a training workshop. So one afternoon, I was there and just observed his class. And then during the intermission, and he and I we talk, and I interview him. And for some reason, he touched my hand. He said, "Oh my God, your hands are so cold." Yes, because I left the house in the morning, which was the sun, and that was already late in the afternoon. And I still have the same clothes on, so I was a little bit chilly, felt chilly. Then he said, "Okay, hold your hand out like this." Okay. And so I did. And then he put his hand, by mine, but not touching. No, he did not even touch. He was just
Okay, yeah, didn't touch, yeah.
Just doing a few of this.
Mm-hmm.
And he did not tell me what would happen, right? And all of a sudden, I felt the warmth. And it was just incredible. Mm-hmm. So I just, oh my God, how could this be? So I turned around and told the other, the workshop attendees, and I told them about this amazing experience I just had. And then all of a sudden, I feel there's like a tingling on top of my head. And then I feel the warmth coming down, just like the shower, but the shower mm-hmm. is on top of the skin. And this is inside, like you were saying, internally you feel the warmth just like showering down. And then he was saying, "I'm giving you chi, I'm giving you chi." Then I turned around, and he put he's not very tall, so he put his hand over my head. He said, "I'm giving mm-hmm. you chi." And at that moment, I realized chi is real.
Yeah, but there's not much. There are not too many that people, actually can do it.
No, I still don't have that. Sometimes I could sense people if they have very strong chi, but I could not rendering chi as Master Zhang Xuexing can do. He just incredible. So mm-hmm. yeah, but that was my introduction to chi, and I realized it is real. And
it's really great. Yeah. I have a friend. I have a friend that he and his wife and his daughter used to attend Bruce Lockeruba's festival that he had honoring Master Joe, his birthday festival every year. Mm-hmm. And I was up there, and they said, he came up to me, he said, "My daughter heard that you did something for somebody and made them, feel a whole lot better. Do you think you could look at her knee?" And I said, "Well, I'm not a medical doctor. I have a PhD, but I'll look at her knee, sure." So he said, "Look, we've been to orthopedic specialists. We've been to all these different people, and this poor knee of hers is swollen all the time, and mm-hmm. she's in pain all the time." I said, "Well, let me look at it. Let me see what I can do." So I just did the wake the Lao Gong up, mm-hmm. kind of thing here, and went and put my hands about 3 inches away from her knee, mm-hmm. and just sat there. And she said, "What you said." Mm-hmm. "Oh, it's getting warm. It's getting warm." I said, "Oh, that's good. That's good. That's good." I said, "Just, I think it's going to do a whole lot better now. We'll just see. I don't know, but let's just keep thinking about it getting better and better." And I stayed there about 10 minutes, took my hands away, and, she said, "Okay. So she got up and she walked around. She said, "Yeah, it feels a little better." So I didn't think much more about it. Mm-hmm. But about a month later, I get an email from her dad. He said, "Her knee is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it." And 2 years later, he wrote me and said, "It's still fine." So, chi, no chi, suggestion, whatever you want to say.
Yeah, probably
it healed her.
She has some kind of blockage around her knee. Mm-hmm. And then, so it did not feel right. And will not function well. You probably just blow it open and blow those blockage away. Yeah.
I've had a lot of experiences like that with mm-hmm. not only myself, but other people. But the people that can actually do that, like I told you about Peter, to me, they're very rare. And there's so much fake stuff going on today that I think it's very sad.
It is true. Yeah, some people, yeah, there's just one guy on YouTube is like, could the little paper on fire or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? So
no,
so
they
but
can't. That's a trick.
yeah, yeah, that's a trick. Yes.
Yeah.
So sounds like the reason you are able to bury alive. When you say bury alive, you will put in some kind of container or a coffin or whatever, and so you had a limited space. That means you have limited air.
Yes.
And then you were in that very confined small space for many hours. I could not believe they only 3 hours the first time. That's a long time. Okay. And so because you are able to control your breathing into a very slow level, so you don't intake a lot of air, right?
Right.
And so you just into like some kind of trance, is that right? So that's why that the air in that little coffin can last you for several hours. Am I saying these things all correctly?
Yeah. No, you're saying it right. I mean,
Oh, okay.
When we first started this thing, I'm gonna jump back for a second. In East Texas, and we were working on the idea of the Gtumo that I got from my teacher, Sifu Lee. That wasn't the same as the same thing. It was his was a Taoist method, but the other method I learned later, Trangu Rinpoche, basically told me about it and then explained that I need to go read this book and that book and start studying the Tibetan yoga and so on, which I did. He introduced me to that, and I started working with it for a long time, and that helped me understand more about controlling the mind and the body. So I ended up working with this for quite a while, and then started playing with the ability to breathe and take care of the breathing and slow the heart rate and all that. And I realized that this was essentially what the earlier fakirs were doing, were putting themselves into a hypnotic trance and suggesting that they slow down and slow down and slow down. Some of them were so good at it that you couldn't even actually detect a heart rate. It was almost impossible. It was just like thump, thump, like this.
So how long it took you? You were talking about training. How long the training was until you can get to like 3 hours, because that 3 hour mark was already remarkable. So how long for you, and how did you train yourself? Did you put yourself in what kind of environment that you can have little air, or not in the closet?
I did the training for quite a few years before I decided to attempt it for that first time. And each time that I did it, I used a combination of herbs, and the herbs were the ones that are thought of. I'll give you the English names. I have the Chinese names, but I can't pronounce them that well. I used ginkgo biloba, I used astragalus, I used cordyceps, and rhodiola rosea. They were all herbs that help to improve oxygenation of the body. Then I practiced for the first time fasting. I would fast for a week on just water, taking the herbs for about 2 weeks before the test. And then I would work on practicing the special meditative techniques. One of the things I had to do with the meditative technique was to develop the ability, Violet, to not panic when closed in a very small space. And so I had the coffin, if you will, built by a cabinet shop, and I would practice that in my wuguan, in my school. We would seal it up, and I would stay in there for an hour, or whatever, and then I would do it again for 2 hours or whatever, and keep trying it to see how it would do. But I think the main thing was just simply trying to make sure that I didn't panic, in that situation. So I can't tell you exactly how slow my breathing was, or how many breaths there were per minute necessarily, because it was a self-induced trance or meditative trance. Every time that I would start to have no air, no oxygen, I would start to cough, or I would start to feel like I was going deeper or passing out. So I would beat on the side of the thing, and they would open it up and let me out. That's kind of how we practiced. I even tried getting in a leaf bag one time, and putting a leaf bag over my head. That was crazy. I shouldn't have done that.
So you talk about you did fasting first. So what does the fasting do to our body and help you to prepare for that?
Your metabolism, if you are a large person like I am, your metabolism burns an awful lot of oxygen, and especially if it's trying to digest food or if it's working with the internal organs. So fasting helps slow down all of those processes. Even just by fasting for a while, you really can help your body's organs regenerate themselves. My longest fast, which had nothing to do with being buried alive, but it was when I started fasting back years and years and years and years ago, I did 30 days. I fasted for 30 days on just water.
You drank water, yeah, okay.
Yeah, just water, nothing else. I'll have some water now. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was a very interesting experience. And you talk about having some serious meditative experiences when you're fasting for 10, 15 days. You go into ketosis, and you kind of, it's one of my friends said, it's kind of like taking a little trip and never leaving the farm. So
okay, yeah.
You can really get high on that. But yeah, the fasting was part of it and helped. So in the trance state, I had given myself the post hypnotic suggestion that my respiration and breathing would slow down, and that my heart rate would slow down. And we tested that with people taking my pulse and so on. And we did a lot of preparation. I didn't just want to jump right into this, I mean, just and end up being dug up dead. So it was better to take some time and practice with I had an assistant and friend, close friend and student named Jerry Payne, who was very helpful. So you could describe it as a form of yoga breathing, but not really. It was more of a Taoist technique and a self-hypnotic technique to slow things down.
Okay, great. Thank you for that information. It's fascinating. So now let's get back to talk to, you're being buried alive the second time. And it was at this car dealership, right?
Yeah.
And then you talk about the concrete block. So then what did they do? How did they build the setup, everything?
Yeah, what we did was set it up was this. I had seen some video, not really video, but I had an 8mm movie film actually at the time called Magicians of India. And it had shown, back in the 30s, I guess, and it had shown how they had little escape routes and things they could get out of and then go back into the thing and all this, and part of that was fake. So I said, if we do it in the doctor's office, the public won't necessarily believe it. But why don't we do it in a way that no way it could be faked? So the guy says, okay, this guy, Mr. Day, who owned the place, he says, how are we going to do that? I said, okay, you have a big open parking lot that has absolutely solid concrete, so there can't be any trap doors. He said, yeah, I got that. I said, okay, well, you build me a burial chamber that is going to be, let's say 12 feet long, 12 feet square, a 12-foot square, and about 5 or 6 feet high. And then I want you to put that up on big cindercrete blocks so anybody can look underneath it to see there's no trap door. There's no way I could get out of the bottom and disappear or anything like that.
So you did not have the smoking mirror or anything?
Yeah, there's no smoke and mirrors can happen. That's right. That's right. So I said, and I want you to build it because I don't want to have anything to do with it. And you can use this box that I had built or you can build your own. So he used the one I had because it was, let's see, that box was 6'2" or 6'3" high.
How tall are you?
The one that I was built in. I'm
no,
6'1".
6'1". So
I'm
it's
6'1".
a little bit tiny space.
I'll put up a picture. You'll see it with me in it.
Okay.
And then it was about 27 inches wide, and it was 18 inches deep, which is about from the back of my chair to about right here, about that deep. Okay. So that was what it was in. And the doctor calculated that there was no way, if that was sealed, that somebody could breathe normally, let's say normally, in such an enclosure if it was sealed for more than 45 minutes to an hour, because there would be too much buildup of stale air, carbon dioxide, and you would die. And I said, okay. He said, well, we're going to make this safe. I said, how are you going to do that? He said, well, we're going to put a walkie-talkie in there with you. And I said, no, if you put anything in there with me, somebody will tell you that I had a little oxygen bottle here or a little oxygen bottle there. I want you to check the whole thing out. Then before we do this, I'm going into the office with you, the doctor, and I'm going to let you strip search me. I want you to look every part of my body, everywhere, my ears, nose, and every other place, and make sure I have nothing on me. And then you can help me dress in my outfit, which I was wearing my thin cotton Chinese top and pants that I usually wear, Han Zifu. And then you walk me out to the thing, and then you put me in there, and you make sure nothing is there with me. He said, well, then if we lock you up like that and then close that up and seal it, what if you're dead when we dig you up? I said, then I'll be dead, and you'll know it didn't work. And he goes, this is making me nervous. I said, well, it's not doing a whole lot for me either, but I'm going to do it anyway. So that's what they did. And this box that we built, the chamber, the plywood box, the big giant one that was 12 by 5 or 6, that we filled up with 30 tons of damp sand. Now, that's a lot of weight. That's inside the big burial chamber. See? Okay. And then they dug the grave in that. Okay, that was going to put the coffin that I was going to be in that. So they put the coffin down in it, packed the sand all around it. We use damp sand because air doesn't permeate through it easily at all if it's damp. If it's real loose sand, then it can. So that's what we did. And the box, before they put the box in there, they had put plastic sheets all underneath and on the sides, so that when they closed the box, they locked it, and then they sealed it with marine plywood, with marine grade putty on the edges, so no air could get in. And then they wrapped the plastic over that and sealed that with duct tape. So the thing was completely sealed off.
Whoa. Was Linda on the side? I mean, your wife was on the side watching these?
Vivian? Yeah.
Yeah, Vivian. I'm sorry. I don't know.
That's all right. It's all right. I didn't have a girlfriend named Linda, or if I did, I'm going to get in trouble for saying that. Vivian.
I did not mean to give you trouble. Okay.
She and I had been married for 11 years at the time we did this. And she was okay with it because she'd seen me do a whole lot of other things that were quite dangerous, getting out of straitjackets and doing things underwater and all that kind of stuff. But these were all tricks, and this was not a trick. And she was a little bit nervous. She was okay with it, but she was nervous, probably because she was also very pregnant with our second daughter.
Oh my God.
And she didn't want to be a single mom, you know. So we've been married 59 years now. We just celebrated our 59th anniversary. So she's still with me. But she made me promise after that last buried alive that I'd never do it again. So I didn't.
Okay. So they made sure, you know, your box, your coffin was well sealed, and then they put the damp soil around the box, and then they let you lay in there for several hours. For how long? 5 hours.
5 hours. Yeah. Yeah. We had planned for 5 hours. They had people from my Kung Fu school were there watching and so on. And they did a little Tai Chi demonstration and so on, which was, you know, good advertising. And there was national television news, NBC, I believe. CBS had cameras there, and there was an EMT on site. There was also Jerry. I told you about Jerry Payne, my assistant, who was there. And they would put up signs that would say, you know, 3 hours, 20 minutes, 4 hours, you know, whatever, like that. That was it. But as I said before, there were no safety measures inside the coffin, the box. It was just me sealed up in the dark. I had no flashlight. And you talk about dark. That was, as Sylvester Stallone said in that movie one time, this is serious dark.
So how did you know when to that the time was up, and so yeah, what happened?
I had a deal with Jerry Payne, my friend and student, and he had a big shovel, and he was going to bang on the side of the box with the shovel. We'd tried this before, and the vibrations shaking the box would go through the sand, and I could feel it, and that would bring me out of the trance. So that then they would dig me up. That worked out until we had a little bit of a problem. So
what happened?
Well,
you're still alive right now. So
I'm in there.
But how was the accident?
What happened was there were about 300 or 400 people there watching this event, and along with the cameras and everything else. And some guy who had a few many things to drink, I guess, showed up. He was inebriated, and he picked up the shovel on the side of the box and started yelling, "This is all a fake. There's nobody in there. This is all blankety blank." He was cursing and started hammering on the side of the box with the shovel. Well, I felt it. And I thought, oh, gosh, it's over, you know. So I woke up. I brought myself out, woke up. Then I'm lying there going, okay, I don't hear anybody digging. They were about 3 feet on top of me, of, you know, this damp sand. And I said, nobody's digging. What am I going to do now? Oh, wait a minute. Well, any minute it'll happen. And then I started feeling the air get a little stale because I was now awake and I was breathing and my heart rate was going up. And of course, I was nervous. Now, what if they all left? You know, you start having these weird things go through your mind, right? And I said, okay, well, there's only one thing I can do, and that is wait. So I started trying to go back into the trance-like state, the hypnotic state. But I'd have to tell you that it was not easy because I was scared, kind of. I was a little apprehensive. And I went back into the state. I don't think I got all the way in it because I was really kind of not getting much air at the time. And about that time, I heard a thump, thump, thump on the box. A few minutes, I guess maybe 30 minutes later. It was at least 30 minutes. And I heard the shovels, digging and digging, and they hit the wooden top of the box, bang. And then I heard the stuff ripping away, and I'm just at the point where I'm not getting a lot of air. And I never felt so good as when they pulled that thing open, and that air never tasted so sweet. I guarantee you, as it came flooding in. So that's why Vivian says, "Don't ever do this again." You know. So yeah, it was kind of scary.
So if there wasn't that incident, you probably could stay longer. Of course, you guys already made an agreement. It was 5 hours.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so did the doctor took your measurements, your bioindexes, and see how
Yes.
you were?
Yes. Immediately, you'll see a picture come up here where I'm sitting on the edge of the box talking to the news media and stuff. And then after that, he took me into the office and took my heart rate, respiration, blood pressure, all this other stuff. And he says, "Well, I don't know how you did it, but you did it." I said, "I've told you. All you have to do is learn how to control your fear, your mind, and you can learn to get into your unconscious mind and you can control yourself." I mean, look, nature doesn't allow us to get into our unconscious control mechanism easily because some people are just idiots and they would do that and end up saying, "Well, I'm going to slow my heart rate, and fall over dead." So there's reasons why we have these things in place to keep us from meddling around with our internal organs and other things. But if you learn how to do it correctly, you can do some amazing stuff. I don't regret doing this, Violet. I don't. But what I do think was important is that this convinced this doctor there must be something else to this. It's not just some kind of trick. And at that time, again, back in the 70s, like that, most of your medical people thought controlling respiration, heart rate, healing with the mind were all bogus stuff that were performed by fake Indian magicians and Houdini and stuff like that. What I'm proudest of is that I was told, because I met this guy later on, I met an oncologist from Fort Worth. His name was Dr. O. Carl Simonton. And he and his wife and I met at another party where I was entertaining. And he said that he was inspired by the tests that I had done on television that he had seen, and that he was an oncologist and he didn't believe in all this stuff, but it sounded like this was for real.
So
this
he
guy
wasn't on site when you were actually doing in
he was
the
not really there.
I see.
No, but he and his wife talked to me. She was Stephanie Matthew Simonton and him. He went off to India and to Asia and started studying their methodologies of mind controlling body. Mm-hmm. And he wrote a book after he practiced these methods himself called Getting Well Again, which is a book about using this concept to cure or help cure cancer. I'll put up a picture of the book for you.
Okay, that will be helpful for all of us.
Yeah, and he almost got drummed out of the oncological business by the Fort Worth people, the doctors in Fort Worth, because they said he'd lost his mind. He never said, "Do this and not that." In other words, he always encouraged his patients to continue getting their regular medication or their radiation or whatever they were doing, but he said, "Do this," and also along with it. So what he discovered was that he had clients that would have a tumor the size of a grapefruit in their abdomen or somewhere. And by using this method that he came up with based on these ideas, they would reduce it down to the size of a green pea. And this was their mind. Now, let me give you a caveat here. That didn't work for everybody. And I said to him, why do you think that is? He said, it's very simple. It took me a while to figure it out, but here's what I found out. There are people who have an unconscious will to live no matter what. And there are people who have an unconscious will to just give up and die if they're told they have something. Those people in that second group, this won't work for them hardly at all until they convince themselves they have a right to be alive. So just because you say to yourself, I'm getting better, doesn't work for that group of people. For the other group of people that have the idea that I'm going to beat this, I'm going to work on it, I'm going to make it happen, this works for them. And I've sent so many people to them. Carl died, I don't remember how many years ago, but some years back. But his wife, and now his second wife actually, is running the Cancer Counseling and Research Center in, I think, California. And they're still operating today using these methods. And I've sent a number of my students and their family to these people, and they've had really great success. So I feel like I had a tiny, tiny little part in maybe helping convince this guy to do what he's doing. And hopefully that maybe save some lives.
Oh, definitely.
If I did, then my job has been done,
Yeah, definitely. So, and this is very, very remarkable and incredible. And you know what, Dr. Painter, I really, really enjoyed our conversation today. And
thank you.
I had so much fun. And thank you so much. But before I let you go, do you have any last word you want to share with our friends and in front of the video?
I think, yeah, I think I want to say this. We have one more, which will be number 6 in the series. This is number 5.
Yes.
I want to thank you so much for caring and helping me share this long and winding road of mine with your viewers and your fans. I really welcome the opportunity. It's nice to have almost a living biography that you did of all this stuff. I'm still wondering why, but I'm happy.
I still think
that you helped.
Hollywood or Netflix should make a movie out of your life. Netflix, are you out there listening, watching? You should do that because it will be fascinating.
Well, that would be interesting. Yeah, right.
But
what, thank you so much for your help. I've always admired. I've admired you and what you're doing.
No, forget about it.
Yeah, really, you're really great, and you have promoted so many great things, and also you going around and helping everybody. It's wonderful. I wish more people. This is you said say something. I will. I wish more people in the Chinese martial arts, especially the internal martial arts, would be as open and as caring, and stop running each other down, and just help each other make these things grow to a higher level, and try to do more authentic things. So, I think this is a great job that you're doing, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. But I beg to be different. Yes, from time to time, I may have heard somebody, have not very favorable comment about others. But in general, my years in this community, I still think very positively and about how we treating each other and
yes.
Yeah. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for your contribution and to the art and your willingness to spend time with us.
Thank you.
Everyone, if you have questions, I think you probably have a lot of questions. and you can send a question to me or to Dr. Painter directly, okay? And you can find our contact information right below this video, okay? Well, thank you all very much for spending the time with us. Bye.